Further debate? The member from Thornhill.
Good morning, Speaker. I will be sharing my time this morning with three fellow members, the member from York Simcoe, the member from Durham, and the member from Leeds Grenville. I'm interested in this particular bill because, as members here know, over the initial 4 years, my first term, I spent a lot of time on two opposite ends of the age spectrum. One was young children, and the other seniors. We have a lot of those in all of our ridings, notably in mine, and so when we can take some measure that assists one of these extremes, I am always up for it. And our party, I would argue, has the best track record in the entire House for dealing with seniors. We constantly are bringing forth, whether it be private members' bills or our support for other legislation, we do work in order to support our seniors. And I myself have introduced several times a property tax deferral bill for low-income seniors, and it's a bill that the Liberal government voted down twice, including for the first and last time in history voting down a bill where one of their own members was a co-sponsor. I found that rather interesting, especially in light of the fact that that bill was reintroduced by way of an election promise by that Liberal government in September during the election campaign. Who says they can't learn, Speaker? But I digress. It is because of our party's support for seniors that I stand here today and speak to this bill. We have in Ontario a jobs crisis. That's right, we have a jobs crisis. You've heard those words. Listen well, because we have one, and it's in the private sector. This means Ontarians across this entire province, Ontarians are in the depths of an income crisis as well. And many of these Ontarians are taking care of aging parents and taking care of aging grandparents, especially in these tough economic times. It is the job of government to create the right conditions for businesses to thrive so that they can, in turn, create good-paying jobs for Ontarians, and so that Ontarians can indeed take care of their families. Accountability, fiscal responsibility on the part of the government, these are crucial to achieving that objective. So at a time like this, when we are literally standing on the brink of an economic disaster in the province of Ontario, and no, Speaker, I'm not overstating, every single move counts. And at all times, the government must make the decisions that will deliver the biggest bang for the taxpayer's buck. It's incumbent on the government to do this. The question for us, Speaker, is this. Is the McGuinty government doing what it should to help Ontarians get the good-paying jobs they need so that they can help their families? And the facts, I'm afraid, suggest that this is not the case. Ontario lost 75,000 full-time private sector jobs in October alone. In question period yesterday, the Premier stood up and said proudly that Ontario had regained 276,000 jobs since the recession, which occurred, as we know, in 2008-2009. That's a gross number. It's not a net number, and we have to start thinking in net terms, because if we're creating jobs but losing more, we're basically not even running in place. This is the 58th straight month in which our province, once Canada's economic engine, has had a jobless rate higher than the national average. This means that in far too many cases, Ontarians who are supporting their aging parents or supplementing their parents or their grandparents' retirement incomes may well be out of a job. At a time like this, a responsible government would be considering measures that would target our jobs crisis, proposing for consideration by this House bills that are innovative, that are thought out, that are meaningful. Enter the McGuinty government on a white horse with the Healthy Home Renovation Tax Credit. But on closer examination, that horse is stumbling.
Ooh, you got that right.
The armor is tin, and the knight on the horse is tilting at windmills again.
Oh, no.
If the aim of this bill is to help seniors, it fails miserably. If the aim of this bill is to help Ontarians with disabilities, it fails immeasurably. If the aim of this bill is to stimulate Ontario's economy, it fails completely. The only thing that hits the mark with this bill is the title. It does have a nice ring to it. Healthy Homes. Let's talk about how it fails our seniors. Let's consider how much of an impact Bill 2 could have on Ontario families and seniors. About 13% of Ontario's population is over 65 years of age and meets the age requirement of Bill 2, about 1.8 million people. The median income for seniors in Ontario, meaning the largest number of seniors fall into this income category, is $25,000 a year for a single, $45,000 for a couple. To be eligible for the $1,500 maximum end tax credit under Bill 2, a senior has to spend $10,000 on certain home renovations. We're talking about things, according to the bill, that are attached to mobility, functionality, accessibility, not covered by any other program, and not meant in any way to enhance the value of the property. So, at that income level, in the best case scenario, we're talking about nearly half of the annual income of most seniors living in this province, and that is the spending limit. So you're writing off a number of people, a huge number of people right away, while some seniors in Ontario may be in a position to put $10,000 into necessary renovations, which, let's face it, is a very substantial sum. The reality is that far too many can't. And the other caveats we've heard of, this bill peels that onion away and away and away, and it gets down pretty far, I would say right down to the core of the onion, or indeed the seed. And so I've got to ask the question, Speaker, how cynical is that? Are you really out to help seniors? Because the slice of the seniors' pie that you're actually helping is minuscule. Now, especially with savings having taken a very serious hit over the past couple of years and diminishing the nest egg that provides for seniors cash flow, this is what you're doing. And we have already established that there is a jobs crisis in Ontario. Seniors who are living off their savings or are dependent on their families for income are unlikely to be able to take advantage of this tax credit, and too many of our families at this point cannot assist because, as we know, Speaker, we're dealing with a situation where, as I've mentioned, our employment or unemployment level is the highest in the country. For the past 58 months, it's over 8%. We're running a risk, because of the softness of the economy, of seeing that expand. Furthermore, on this bill, even if you are a senior on low income and you've managed to save enough money to renovate your home, to increase its value so that you can build equity and secure an income for the future, well, then you're not eligible, because that's not what this tax credit is about. And if you are a senior with a disability and require this help, you can only benefit from this tax credit if you're not already receiving any other assistance. So if you're on ODSP, or if you have assistive devices that are paid for by the province, any of those things, they negate at least some, if not all, of what you can claim under this bill. So the question is begged, who does this bill actually help? The answer is the Liberals, because it sounds a heck of a lot better than it actually is. And it benefits that small percentage of seniors who are in a stable financial situation and who probably would have proceeded with a needed renovation whether there was a tax credit or not. The rules of the game on this bill say that you must have attained at least 65 years by the end of 2012. I feel a very personal relationship to this bill because I will have attained that age by the end of 2012. Thank you very much for that round of applause. And what that means is that if I want to do a $10,000 renovation to my home, I get to put $1,500 in my pocket, and yes, Speaker, I can afford it, so I might do it. But the truth is I don't need it. So if I do it, it'll be something that will enhance my mobility, given that I, God forbid, need that, or I'll do it to enhance the value of my home, and I'll put $1,500 free dollars in my pocket. That's who's going to benefit. And that's not what the intention should have been. You have the option to help so many people in this province. You have that option. You could do it by broad-based tax relief. If you want to help seniors only, there are so many ways to do it. You could increase long-term care beds. You could certainly help in the home by increasing your allocation to home care. But no, you do basically a political dance and you dangle a carrot that most people cannot have. That's what this bill is. And let there be no error about that. Like many of the McGuinty government policies we've had to endure over the years, the ban on pesticides springs to mind. It's one of my favorites. This bill has a title that overcommits while the content underdelivers. It guaranteed a ban of pesticides in the province of Ontario 100%. But if you take a look at the exemptions and you find out what was actually banned, they banned 1.5% of the use of pesticides. That was the 2,4-D you put on your front lawn. The rest of it, all the rural people and the golf courses and the railway rights-of-way. So the 100% ban was a 98.5% ban. My point is this. Whatever you do by way of legislation, you say one thing with a title and you do something else with regulation. Your intent is almost invariably always political. Sure, it's a great thing to get a $1,500 tax credit, and many Ontarians can certainly use $1,500. Unfortunately, those who need it the most are in practice rendered ineligible.
Hear, hear.
In short, this bill sets out to benefit those like myself who don't need it. So this bill actually fails the broad-based category called seniors. People who are in need, people who cannot have through this bill. How does this bill fail families? Because it does that too. If the goal is to offer financially strapped families some relief, then how about taking action to tackle the actual problem at hand? I mentioned broad-based tax relief. The example that comes to mind immediately, because we dealt with it in this House based on an NDP private member's bill last week, is HST relief on heating. Or you could do HST relief on hydro. There are a lot of things that you could do. So when it comes to economic stimulus, putting 8% of the cost of your home heating or the cost of your hydro back in the pocket of every single Ontarian and having those people spend that money to stimulate the economy, that's great. And by the way, that applies to seniors as well. And it applies to the families who take care of seniors. So why not deal with that? An HST break on hydro bills to leave families some additional income in their collective pocket so that they could make the decisions on what they need to spend their money on. Or spending responsibly with respect for taxpayers' money so that Ontarians are not overburdened with taxes and fees and premiums that take away from their families. That's the hallmark of this government. And while we're on the topic of spending responsibly, I mentioned earlier that Ontario is in the midst of a jobs crisis, and Ontarians are facing an income crisis. And my friends over there know full well that the depth of the economic problems that Ontario has currently is extremely significant. Everybody knows we're in trouble. I'm afraid, Speaker, that people don't know just how much trouble we're in. When you've got a province that owes over $250 billion, and with the projected deficits, forget about promises made, promises broken, projected deficits, I don't see us getting to a balanced budget before we get to a collective debt of about $300 billion. One begins to wonder when it is that the ability to borrow on the part of this province becomes compromised. And I don't think I overstate the case, Speaker, to say that this is the precise scenario that we saw in California, worse in Italy, in Greece. We see bond rating agencies downgrading even France at this point. Where does Ontario stack up in this? We have a problem. Do you know who's not facing an income crisis, Speaker? The McGuinty government. No income crisis there. In 2011-2012, the McGuinty government took in a record revenue of $108.3 billion. I point that out because when we're dispensing money in one program or another, and we're listening to fall economic statements, we've got to get the definition in terms correct. The finance minister said that one of the problems that created the $16 billion deficit projected for the current fiscal year is that revenue fell short by $750 million. It fell short of his projections, but his projections haven't been right since he's been finance minister. Okay? What it didn't do is it didn't fall short of the prior year. We actually collected record revenues in the province of Ontario, about $1.6, $1.7 billion more in the current year than we did prior year. So when you talk about revenue falling short, let's remember that. And that's revenue that comes out of the pockets of individual Ontarians and Ontario corporations. Still, they put our province into a $16 billion deficit.
Absolute shame.
Since donning the mantle of Finance Minister, Dwight Duncan increased spending by $21 billion per annum, has never balanced a single budget. The reason that the McGuinty government was able to get away with spending that much is because the province can still borrow. And that's how the current Finance Minister has increased Ontario's debt by $70 billion. Yet that is still not the most frightening aspect of the Liberal spending spree of the past 8 years. The McGuinty government has managed to increase its spending by also moving money from the reserve funds to cover their expenses, and we illustrated that in question period last week. The Auditor General's review of the 2011 pre-election report on Ontario's finances stated that the purpose of the reserve is to, and I quote, offset the impact of unexpected and adverse future events of the magnitude of, for example, a SARS outbreak in 2003 or a global recession like the one in 2008. It should never be used to cover year-over-year expenditures or to reduce a deficit. This irresponsible use of the reserve fund is not in the best interests of Ontario, and certainly it's not in the best interests of Ontario seniors. Events like SARS, as we know, tend to have a significant impact on the senior population, Speaker. Ontario's Auditor General, in the review of the 2011 pre-election report on Ontario's finances, states that Ontario's population of seniors is projected to grow to 14.1% this year and 16% in 2016. Statistics also indicate that health care spending per person rises significantly after age 65. Despite this, and the expected rise in seniors' population, the government somehow believes that the impact of aging on health care costs will be negligible over the next 3 years. Now, if that is not a bad, by the way, that's also coming from the AG's report. Now, if that is not a bad excuse for horrific planning, I'm not sure what is. Like always, the McGuinty government has cold facts staring it in the face, but chooses to look the other way and daydream and defer. And that's what they've done for 8 years, and that's what they're still doing. And I find that, Speaker, more than passing strange, because we're not in the Parliament that we left back in June. It's a new day, and we saw that last Thursday when this government began to lose votes. And I would say, Speaker, that heralds a point in time where they're going to lose a significant vote. I'm not rattling a saber. The point is, you've got to come to the table and realize that you do not run the place single-handedly, that there are exigencies and problems that have to be addressed, and that there are people who represent a majority of the citizenry of the province of Ontario sitting on this side of the House who, if the Liberals are absent without leave, will take their place. We're ready to do that. According to the AG, our health care costs will rise significantly as a result of an increasingly aging population. How does this government plan on taking care of Ontario seniors when it is wasting money on ineffective programs? $60 million here, $1 billion there, an e-health scandal or two, and it all adds up to literally billions in debt, billions in deficits, and a very vulnerable seniors population that cannot count on the services that they have worked hard for in the province that they built. And that is something that I keep top of mind when I deal with seniors, as I do with some frequency. These are the folks who built what we have. These are the folks who invented that rule that said you don't spend more than what you have. These are the folks who understand that there's a column marked needs and a column marked once. And you don't go and stray into that column marked once unless you have an extra amount of money put aside for the rainy day, or at least the day where you can go and delve into once, take that vacation, whatever it happens to be. So on this side of the House, Speaker, we say that if the McGuinty government really wants to do something for seniors, they should rein in their spending, show some respect for the taxpayer, manage the province's finances responsibly. That way, seniors will receive the health care, the medication that they need, the services that they require, and, yes, Speaker, the reward that they deserve. Which means that the McGuinty government could have done a lot more for seniors than offered token policies that missed the mark. In fact, Speaker, I would say to you that what we have in the first 2 weeks of this 40th Parliament, by way of the presentation or at least the announcement of impending legislation or bills that affect Ontario, are bills that I consider entirely to be cynical. They're all politically motivated. Oh, we think we have a problem in southwestern Ontario, we'll go and we'll fix that fund. We have a problem with seniors, we'll go and we'll address something to them. But there isn't really any help. It's kind of a shell game. So the McGuinty government could have done so much more for seniors than offer these token policies. There were warning signs, you know, all along the way as Ontario was slipping into an economic downturn, losing jobs long before there was any global crisis. We were out there raising the warning flag. Nobody was listening. It was going to be happy times forever. But it wasn't, was it? The McGuinty government was not listening then. Unfortunately, it doesn't look like they have learned any lesson, and they're not listening now. The fall economic statement confirmed that Ontario's debt is soaring, literally soaring. I cannot believe what I saw here in this House last week. When you have, I ran companies for most of my life, and I know what the bottom line is supposed to look like. There is no bottom line in governing a province, but there is an ability and a need to bring in a bottom line that is zero. In other words, you create a budget, you take in the money you predict, you spend that money, and you wind up with zero. You don't wind up in debt. You don't wind up in deficit. But what I saw here last week was a standing ovation for a finance minister who announced that he was delivering a $16 billion deficit. And that was up $2 billion over a $14 billion deficit last year. But don't worry, Speaker, we're going to balance the budget by 2017-18, he said.
That's after the next election.
Where I come from, all you have to do is sit down at your computer and open up Excel and put in the points for each year. And the way I see it, those lines are spreading. Our deficits are rising. Our ability to balance a budget by 2017-18, well, that's well beyond the next election, so why should they worry? So that's what I saw last week, and yet here we are with programs that suggest that what we're going to do is take money that wasn't spent in other programs, shift them, and we'll be able to afford these new programs. The fact of the matter is that's spending, and you can call it anything you want, but that's spending in excess of what we had, and the point is that the deficit next year, mark my words, because we'll be here discussing it next year, will be in excess of what they're talking about, and moving quite the opposite from the line that goes towards a balanced budget. How the Premier and the Finance Minister...
Excuse me, there's two sidebars down there by the third party. I'd appreciate it if we could keep it down to a dull roar. Thank you.
Thank you, Speaker. How the Premier and the Finance Minister of Canada's largest province are always the last ones to know is beyond my ability to explain, as is their stubborn refusal to consider managing government salaries. Let's put everyone on a fair playing field, Speaker. Why should Ontarians be getting a deal far worse than government employees? Why should Ontario families, who are the ones responsible for their elder parents and grandparents, or those parents and grandparents themselves, foot the bill through taxes for people who don't want to step up and take one for the team? Ontario families had to take shorter shifts at work, had to pay higher fees for services, health tax being one, and had to take pay cuts. Some non-unionized employees had their wages frozen for a few years. According to some reports, Canadian Federation of Independent Business comes to mind, even before we consider benefits and pension plans, government salaries are 13% higher than wages for comparable jobs in the private sector. So when we talk about wage freezes because we need more money capable of addressing the deficits that preclude these kinds of programs, we're not just whistling in the wind. Statistics Canada shows that there were over 92,000 people working for the Government of Ontario. That's the public sector, not the broader public sector. So it excludes arm's-length agencies, boards, commissions, what have you. Their combined salary, according to Stats Canada, was over $6.5 billion in 2010. Health and social service institution worker salaries reached over $13.5 billion. Add post-secondary and trade institution salaries, another approximately $7.6 billion, local school boards over $14.8 billion, and I might call attention to that because that's actually higher than what we paid health and social services, educating our kids. Government enterprises nearly $3.2 billion. That's where the money goes. Adding all that up, taxpayers are carrying at least $45.6 billion in government salaries. The Auditor General has outlined that collective agreements that the government has negotiated in the past 8 years with the two main ministries included pay increases that in most cases exceeded the rate of inflation. How many Ontarians out there had that same experience? The answer, Speaker, is pretty clear: none. So this may sound like I'm straying a little bit from the point at hand, but the point at hand is our ability to afford what it is we want to do. So we are the first to stand up for seniors, but we're the last who are going to support a bill like that, because all that is increased spending for a very tiny tranche or slice of the population that basically would much prefer broad-based tax relief. If that's not enough, the spending, the Auditor General continues on to say that this was also the case with past negotiated wage settlements across the broader public sector. So this is how Ontarians are paying government workers right now, and we are all on the hook to pay for wage increases if the McGuinty government doesn't find the backbone to do with government workers what Ontarians who don't have cushy government jobs had to do, which is, Speaker, tighten their belts. With salary expenditures of such magnitude, it is simply insulting and irresponsible for the McGuinty government to dismiss doing anything about government worker wages. And then, to add insult to injury, they introduce the Healthy Home Renovation Tax Credit. The Healthy Home Renovation Tax Credit, a bill that pretends to solve seniors' income problems, while in reality it does absolutely nothing to help those Ontarians that are in most need. I cannot reiterate strongly enough, Speaker, the fact that this is a vulnerable segment of the population, and it is a cynical approach to dealing with that vulnerable section of the population to suggest that you're going to create just a bevy of healthy homes by giving seniors across the board something, when in fact you're giving a very tiny number of seniors something, or you're giving seniors who don't need it something. Broad-based tax relief, I say, and broad-based tax relief is what my party is prepared to support, Speaker. That's why we voted with the NDP last week. I began my remarks by stating that our party is proud of our track record of supporting seniors. I will end my remarks by saying that the province that Ontario's seniors left us was an immeasurable gift, and we must never forget that, and we must never forsake it. Ontario has a proud tradition of entrepreneurial spirit, a proud tradition of diversity.
Excuse me, the sidebar at the end, that's the second time I've asked you to keep it down. Thank you.
This is a province of great potential, Speaker, and if you listen to the McGuinty government, you'd hear that their initiatives are making this province ever better. But these claims are quickly negated by the facts. And what the McGuinty government does not want anyone to know is that while they are coming up with catchy bill titles The content of these policies is making Ontario worse. And what is truly distasteful, this time, they are doing so invoking the words Ontario's seniors, as if they were the sole guardians of that group. If you want to invest in Ontario's seniors, invest in home care. We all know it's desperately needed. Put in more long-term care beds. Aging population needs that kind of investment. Offer broad-based tax relief, like an HST cut on essential services for everyone. The Healthy Home Renovation Tax Credit is not the way to repay our seniors for their years of hard work in building our province, and it is not the way to build a better future for their grandchildren.
Here, 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 here.